So I kind of wanted to go over this kind of paper on self-discovery that I put up and kind of go through maybe why and how, and give you some better ideas on how to live your life and be able to make better choices, more appropriate choices, more freeing choices. I think the cause of our suffering as humans is when we believe deep down that we are not lovable or good enough, and that somehow we need to be punished for our being us, maybe our weaknesses, the things that we're developing and growing, and deep inside we believe that if we make a mistake with that we don't deserve happiness, we don't deserve relationships, anything that's helpful for us. So I think we get stuck into kind of a mindset of I'm going to punish me before you can punish me, or I'm going to blame you or blame me before I get punished. A lot of it goes back to the three illusions of government, family, and religion. These three institutions, sometimes knowingly or unknowingly, promote the beliefs that we need to, there's value in being punished. And maybe in certain situations there is, but I think in everyday life we need to learn how to self-govern and to be able to make choices based upon what's appropriate versus what's what we're afraid of being judged for, or critiqued, or we're afraid of looking stupid, or any of those things that throw us into that self-punishing or believing that God or somebody should punish us. So I'll talk a little bit about those three illusions real quick. The main thing that I call an illusion is when we have expectations on something or someone else in the world that makes them responsible for our goodness or our ability to survive and thrive and all those things. So I think the main thing that happens when we're born is that we look to our parents or our the person who's raising us, and we look to them to see if we are valuable and to see if we are lovable. And so we wait and watch to see what their face is doing, what their actions are. And as a child, we start to maybe even read into some of those things that are happening, and gain some reference points that might not be accurate, that we're not lovable or we're not good, that we let our parents down or they've let us down. It's their job to make us feel wonderful, whatever. So that main illusion that it's the family's job to make us who we are and who we're going to be, that's the main illusion. And I'll hear adults still blaming their parents or somebody else for the way that they're living their life, instead of looking at it and saying, okay, well, that was a hard situation that I went through, and I wish I would have seen it differently at a younger age, but I didn't. But now as an adult, I do. So I want to take responsibility for that and for the beliefs that I created during that situation, and I want to fix those, and I want to change my life instead of still blaming them. So that illusion of family goes into our friends. It goes into who we date, who we marry. It goes into our relationship with our own children. And so I think the main thing to remember is that we are the ones that get to formulate our own belief patterns. And I don't think that we do that because we've never been told that we can. We've always been conditioned, right? This is why advertising works so well. It's because, it's always coming at and appealing to that part of you that feels like it's lacking something. And if you just buy this or do this or have that, then you'll be lovable, then you'll be enough. And so for someone who's kind of unconscious or asleep or unaware, they will look to those things outside of themselves and say and believe that if they just have those things, they'll feel whole and complete. If my spouse would just treat me a certain way, I will love myself better. No, if your spouse, treats you a certain way, that means you're going to have more fun. It might mean that you're going to have a freer and a less complicated life, but it doesn't have to give or take away from your own value. And I think that's where we get in trouble, when we believe that other people's opinions of us can give or take away our value as a human being. So that's where we kind of get into trouble. So the original one in my ideas, in my mind, is the family. And the next that falls under that is government. So we believe that it's the government, teachers, medical, military, city government, our countries, all these things. We believe that it's their job to tell us that we're good people, that we're safe. How many hours should I sleep at night? How much, vitamin E should I take? How much, we look to them for everything, and we stop using our own self-awareness and wait for them to tell us how to be okay. I think that we forget that we can learn things on our own, and we can kind of play with our own lives and see what works for us, and maybe what, do I need 6 hours of sleep a night? Do I do better at 9? Like, what works for me? But anyway, we tend to give away all that power. The next one is religion. And this one is a big one in people's lives, because depending upon what they believe and who they believe in, they deep down believe that they're not good enough. And no matter how many people I meet with and they tell me, no, I believe that my God loves me, that I'm a good person, if I question them enough and I push enough buttons, maybe, yeah, they kind of admit that they don't like themselves very much, or that they're afraid of being in trouble. So religion can use the same kind of techniques, if you will, to help condition you into learning that it's not safe to question anything. Curiosity killed the cat, or you need to just, it's better to obey, and those kind of things. And so, yeah, there are times where that is true, but we need to use our own common sense sometimes and see how accurate is this, how true is this, and be able to formulate belief patterns that work for us, that allow us to grow and to develop and to assist in this planet, to help others. So one of the things that helps me to understand and kind of put those 3 illusions into a working order is something that I call the herd mentality. And in this herd mentality, these 3 illusions are working, and the people in there are kind of not aware that they can make choices. They are always, well, most of the time, they are looking to others to see if their choices are okay. And they believe that the herd that they're in loves them no matter what. And I would like to say that that's true, but I've watched over the course of my life people in certain herd mentalities, when they do something that disappoints the other members of the herd, they are sometimes very quick to kick them out of that little herd, and these people have to go and find another herd to fit into, and they kind of herd hop, right? Within this big herd, they herd hop in these little circles, and they believe that these circles, these little herds, are inclusive. They believe that they love them and they take them in. But I think a lot of people find that those herd people are very exclusive, and they're very quick to say you don't fit in, or you're not good enough, or you're not lovable, or you need to change before we can accept you, or any of those things. So this herd mentality can become very limiting and very painful. If you are looking to other people to tell you that you are a good person, you probably are not going to get that consistently in the herd mentality. And if you have belief patterns that just basically say you are unlovable, it won't matter what anybody says to you. Your parents could tell you they love you. Your spouse could tell you. They could show you. They could do everything that they want or that you want them to do, and it still doesn't feel fulfilling to you because you have a belief that pushes those actions away, and you're probably not aware you're even doing that. So within this herd, there's a mantra, and that mantra seems to be based on blame and fear of responsibility. And so to me, when I'm listening to someone that is deep in the herd, you'll hear it go, you, me, you, me. They're just blaming somebody, something, somewhere, not looking for solutions. Okay, it's one thing if you're looking at a situation going, this is hard, or I don't like this, but I need to find a solution, or help me brainstorm through this. I can't figure this out. I need some help with that. You know, that's different than just staying stuck in blame. And so there's also in this herd yin and yang. And in the herd, yin and yang is black, white. It's right, wrong, good, bad, righteous, evil. It's either or. And so it becomes very uncomfortable for us when we are in the herd mentality to be able to see choice, because we are so brainwashed and so controlled by this belief that others determine our value and our worth. Eventually, it should get really hard in there, and that allows us to maybe step away from the herd a little bit and start take responsibility for ourselves. And that's where the herd is a circle with little circles inside, and everybody's kind of going in circles. When we come out of that, I envision this next piece of our existence, this next yin and yang, as an up and down. You know, the serpent's tail, whatever you want to call it, a light wave, whatever. And this yin and yang is based off of curiosity and responsibility. And so this one says, I am that I am. That's the mantra. And it says on the yin, the down, the dark, it says gaining knowledge, perspective, making a game plan. And on the up, on the yang, is practicing and playing with that. And then coming back down, it's tweaking that. What could I do a little differently? And then going back and keep doing this. The way we get to this is through questions. So when we're in the herd and we are suffering, the best thing we can do is start to question our suffering. And the way that I see our mind, body, spirit working together is our subconscious, or our ego, whatever you want to call this, it is very aware of our belief patterns, and its role, if you will, is to get our attention that something, a belief within us, needs to be tweaked or changed. And the way that I see the subconscious getting our attention is through the nervous system. And so if we can become aware of the subtle energies within us, the subtle feelings of butterflies, or some people call panic or anxiety, headaches, body aches, whatever, you know, in certain situations, maybe something's off. Maybe we're in a situation that we're afraid, or that we are angry about. And so our body, our subconscious is going through the body, through the nervous system, and saying, hey, look, there's something here that needs some solutions. And so we can start asking questions about that. What are my emotions? What am I feeling? What am I thinking right now? Because your subconscious, your self-talk is not lying to you. It is telling you exactly what your beliefs are. If you hear in your mind, you're a worthless piece of crap, you're never going to amount to anything, that is your belief. Your belief is, I am that. And that's not true. I believe every human being has value and worth. And I believe that as much as we accept our value and worth, that is what determines our output or our behavior, is how much of our worth we've accepted. So if we accept very little of our worth, then we're usually in a lot of suffering. The more of our worth and value that we accept and utilize, the happier and freer we become. And so when we're hearing these thoughts, we need to maybe write those down right away, because here's the other thing, they're going to disappear. How many times have you been driving along and you hear something like, oh my gosh, this is life-changing for me, I need to look at this, I want to remember this, and you get home and you're like, I don't remember what it was. It's because it goes back down. So you need to somehow write it down as soon as you can, whether it's in a voice recorder, whatever. Get it recorded so that you can go back to that particular aha that you were having, those beliefs that you were having, that you were maybe hearing more deeply for the first time. And so with that said, you now have a peek into your subconscious, what's controlling you. So if you're hearing you're a horrible person, you're never going to amount to anything, nobody ever loves you, nobody ever goes out of their way for you, you're the one that's always sacrificing, you hear these kind of things and you go, okay, so what's my belief? My belief is that it's someone else's job to make me feel like a good person. Now, granted, they maybe should be picking up and doing more. Maybe you've allowed them to get away with something, or maybe you can't change the way they're living their life or how responsible they are, but you can change the way you interpret it about yourself. So it may be true that they're not behaving in a very responsible way, but that doesn't mean that it has to take away your value or your worth. So in that situation, you would go through and you would look at that and you'd say, okay, so what is this person really saying or doing in my life? Or why am I saying that I'm not a good person? Am I not in integrity somewhere? Am I lying to myself somewhere? Should I be stepping up and doing more? Should I be doing less and allowing it to be someone else's responsibility? Is it I'm never going to be as good as so-and-so or whatever. So you want to write these things down and get to the core belief then of, are you afraid of punishment? Just get to the core of that. Like, responsibility is scary. I'm afraid of change. I'm not safe. What are we not safe from? That's such a weird word, safe. Safe means free of suffering, just if you didn't know. People will say, oh, I don't feel safe with this. No, because you have the belief that says that if you change, you're going to suffer, that change is hard, but staying the way that you are is easy somehow, even though it's draining you of all your life and your experiences. In your mind, that belief says it's too hard to change, it's scary, you're going to do it wrong, everybody's going to laugh at you, so just stay the way you are. But what's so funny about that is usually the exact opposite is happening. People do notice when you're stuck, and people do notice when you're suffering. So you're not going to get away from other people's judgment no matter what you do. So you may as well just accept that. And one of the things that I've tried to do in my own life is realize if I have a decision to make or a choice to make, usually we have at least two choices. And one will seem like the easy thing to do. It seems like the thing that, oh, well, this is what I've been doing, or it's what everybody else wants to do, or I'm just too tired to do something different, whatever. And we do the easy thing that doesn't require self-discipline. You're going to end up in bondage. You're going to end up giving away some of your freedom. But if you do the hard thing, which requires self-discipline and compassion and thinking, questioning, planning, and you go through that, you usually end up with more freedom. So this is a way that we can kind of practice, maybe even going back through old things in our life, right? Which we're going to talk about again in a little bit. But anyway, so once you've recognized what the issue is that's controlling you, it's really good to start in your mind and writing, take responsibility for those things. Because responsibility is a scary word for most people, because they think the minute that I say that I'm responsible, then you can hold that against me, or you can punish me, or whatever. and so we're so afraid of that we kind of lose our class a little bit. I've done that so many times in my life. I've lost my class because I was afraid to take responsibility, because I thought that, then people would be like, well, you admitted it, you're a horrible person. Instead of going, yeah, I know, right? I'm working on that. I would defend myself. So we want to kind of get away from that. And so as we're going through these belief patterns and we're seeing these things that are not working for us anymore, we want to start formulating what would be a better belief, what would be a more truthful and freeing belief. What if we believe that you are powerful? What if you believed you were divine and still developing and growing? And what if you believe that it was okay to be curious? It's okay to ask people questions. It's okay to wonder about what makes other people tick. What if it's okay to change your mind in the middle of something and say, you know what, I was out of integrity. It's okay to be wrong. What if we did that? What would that look like? And be able to start going back in time again and going back through old situations and kind of playing through what that could feel like to you. Now, one of the things that's important to remember is you're not doing these things because you are trying to change the other person. You're doing these things because you are trying to develop and change yourself. And this is one that I think is very easy for people to slip into, because they go, oh, well, I did it the right way and they didn't react, and they still stayed mad, or they were still upset with me. Okay, that's their choice. That has nothing to do with you. If you are taking responsibility and the other person is inconsolable, and you've done everything that you can do to try to ask questions and communicate, then you kind of at some point have to let that be their thing. But in our world, we have something called apologies, and they're really weird to me, because I used to get wrapped up in this. It's like, well, you didn't apologize. Okay, well, what does that mean, really? So most people say, well, I said I was sorry. Okay, so what do you do with that? Well, if you're in the herd mentality, you believe that if someone says they're sorry, that now they've taken responsibility, and you don't have to have that responsibility anymore, because now, they've taken it. Now they're the one that's going to be punished or judged, not you, because look, you've been exonerated from that. They've taken the responsibility. So when you're in the herd, it does give you kind of a sense of peace when someone apologizes. But I'm not so sure that is the healthiest thing for us. I wonder, and I think of my own life where I found it is that if I've done something to someone and that has hurt them, the best thing that I can do is ask and to say, look, I recognize that you're in pain and suffering. I might not even know what it was that I did. Can you tell me what I did? And I'm sorry that maybe it was taken that way, or yeah, I was in a pissy mood and I wanted to hurt you, or whatever. Take responsibility as much as you can, whatever that looks like to you, because it may not mean that you're saying that I meant to do it. Okay, this is the other problem. People, when they're blaming, they want you to admit that you meant to do it, and maybe you did, maybe you didn't. So you need to be clear with that one. The next piece is that we want to question that person, because we know that they're in suffering, and we want to try to help if we can, especially if we're not suffering. Even if we are suffering, we still want to help where we can. And so that would sound this way, something like, I can see you're suffering, and I'm sorry, and I want to help as best I can. What do you think you need that will help you to be able to release that and to be able to move forward? Or is there something that we can talk about and brainstorm so that we can plan so that this doesn't happen again? But do you see what I'm saying? You start looking for solutions versus having to put blame on somebody. We become more solution orientated when we go into this responsibility. Now we're no longer believing that somebody has to be punished, and we're looking for new ways of governing ourselves or our choices. So apologies stop being about this fear of being punished, and it actually becomes more productive and solution orientated to being able to change future behavior or choices. So I think that's so important to remember that when you come out of the herd, you're no longer controlled by the word responsibility or punishment. So let's go back to, okay, so you've found this belief, you put a new belief in, and you're trying to imagine what your future would look like if you actually have this belief. So you can go back to an old situation and go back through it. What would it look like when I fell down in front of everybody in third grade and everybody was laughing at me and I started crying? What would it look like if I remembered and I knew that other people's opinions of me did not give or take away my value? Might I have still cried, or might I have laughed, or what would I have done differently? So it's all about this new response versus reacting. Reaction is what we do when we don't have a game plan. Response is what we do when we've thought about it and we realize that we always have choice. So one of the other things we can do in this situation is look around us in that situation for different archetypes, different personality types, things like that. This is where it's good to remember that all the archetypes or personality types really just boil down to the shadow and the light side. And on the shadow side, shadow really just means lack of information and the search for more information. That's it. And when we're in the shadow side, we kind of fall into being a victim. And you can only be a victim so long before you start to push back, and then you become the bully. So the people in the shadow or in the herd mentality or in old habits, even if you're practicing being out of the herd, you have to go back in, right, and pull out new things that you're working on. But remember, when you're in suffering, it happens because we have a lack of information. The more information we have about ourselves or others or the situation, the more choices we have that we can make. So it's important to be able to pull back and go, okay, well, what's the bigger picture here? Why am I believing I'm a victim? When do I push back and become the bully? And we see a lot of people that I was talking to tons of people I talked to, and they're like, oh, well, nobody loves me. I've never, my family doesn't accept me, my friends don't accept me. And it's like, okay, well, what does that look like? Well, every time I go around them, they just, do their own thing and nobody talks to me. Well, do you talk to them? Well, no, because they don't like me. Well, are you interested in them? No, you're not interested in them. You just want them to be interested in you. So if you want to make relationships, become truly, genuinely interested in other people and what they're thinking, what they're saying, what makes them tick. Ask them questions. Find out everything that you can about them, that they feel comfortable sharing. And what starts to happen is you start to see the humanness in all of us. And it stops being, oh, I'm different than you. I swear, in all the years I've been talking to people, I've recognized that everybody thinks they're different. But yet when you sit down and you really get to the bottom of it, everyone is pretty much the same. And it's the way they carry out their sameness that makes it look different. But most people feel the same way. They just feel like they're not lovable. But okay, so in the shadow side, recognize where you feel like the victim and the bully. Recognize where somebody else might feel like they're the victim or become the bully. And talk to them. Now, when we recognize that's what we're doing, we need to get over here to the light side, which means, to me, it's full of choices. It has more knowledge. It has more information available to us. So how do we get from not having information to getting information? Well, we have to become curious. We have to ask better questions of ourselves and others. We have to learn, to study, to develop, gain more information. You can't have wisdom without information. You have to have knowledge, some knowledge and wisdom. So knowledge, game plan, and wisdom is knowing how to carry that out. And that's what makes us wise, is knowing that we have choices and what's appropriate in this situation. And we learn what's appropriate by creating new and more valuable reference points in our life. So we have the reference points that don't work and the reference points that do. And so our questioning is what starts to bring these to life. So we start looking at reference points that we had when we were in the shadow side, and we go, oh my gosh, I was going off of this situation or that situation or blaming this or that. So that's where my reference points were. Because I feel like the brain is constantly scanning for what's wrong with us. And so it's always looking outside going, see, I knew it. Oh, yep, see. And so it's gaining all these reference points, kind of conditioning us, if you will, that we are broken, and giving us visual aids and reference points on why it's true that we're broken. But when we become awake and aware through our questions, we start to look around and we start to ask questions like, is that real? How valid is that? Is there another way of seeing that? Does somebody else see me differently than I see me? What are their reference points about me? Or what has somebody else done in this situation? How's that worked for them? So we start to gain new ideas and new beliefs and new fuel, if you will, to start to respond to life rather than to react to life and to blame. And so on this light side, the attributes over here, where this was victim and bully, over here it becomes self-discipline and compassion. So self-discipline, because we can rise above our emotions and just see those emotions as a red flag, getting our attention to a belief pattern that's off. So it stops being about the emotion, because a lot of people today, it's not like, oh, I have this feeling, so it must be true. It's like, oh, you had a feeling, but the feeling isn't the issue. It's the belief that's fueling your emotion that should be looked at. So as we go through those things, we start to recognize that we just because we have an emotion doesn't mean it has to control us. So we start to use this self-discipline to dig deeper and to find choices and these new reference points. Compassion. Compassion's a funny word, because a lot of people think compassion means warm and fuzzy. Yeah, it has that to it. It has that element to it. But it also has a little bit more. To me, the word compassion also means looking for variables, looking for reasons, looking for triggers. It can mean being gentle on ourselves. It can also mean sometimes kicking ourselves in the butt. You know, one of the things I do is call myself a dumb bunny. And you know, and it's like, quit being a dumb bunny in that. Like, are you kidding me? You're gonna stay there? That's what you're gonna do? Come on, wake up. Let's move. Let's look at something else here. Sometimes compassion can be scary. If you're a mom stuck in an intersection and you've got a little 2-year-old next to you and you can't get out of the intersection and the kid keeps trying to run into the intersection, probably the most compassionate thing you can do to spare its life is to scare it a little bit so it doesn't run into the street. And that's compassion. Then later on explain what was going on or whatever. But sometimes compassion can be a little rough. And so we have to know what's appropriate. If being rough isn't working, then we probably should fine-tune ourselves and go, okay, well, that wasn't what I needed, or that didn't work in that situation. What could I do a little bit differently? So as we're going through this process, and we're going to do it millions of times in our life, of the shadow to the light, the shadow to the light, the shadow to the light, and eventually we stop being afraid of suffering. We don't seek it out, but like, oh, I want to keep making myself suffer, like people do in the herd, which they don't know any different. But over here, we should know that we have a choice. And so when we're working on the I am that I am, we want to remember that we have the ability to use suffering that's already happened or that we're in the moment of to quickly gather up what that belief is and move forward. So one of the things that I like to do is go back in time to an old situation in my life and pull it forward and remember what that felt like when I was suffering in that situation. And then I write about that, and I go back in time and I go through it with more information, and then I go back through it again with more information, and then I go back again with more information, more choices, and I do that until that situation feels more complete. And I feel like if I was in a similar situation today or in the future, I would handle it differently than I did back then. That's growth, that's development, is not allowing the past to control our present or our future. And so once we become really familiar with this process of I am that I am, taking responsibility for ourselves, I am behaving this way because I have this belief or I have this habit, and we're not blaming everybody else. Eventually what happens is we go into the infinity sign, is how I see it, and that yin and yang changes from the herd of black, white, right, wrong, and over here of knowledge and wisdom, and now it becomes receiving and giving. And this is when we recognize that we are always receiving input. We are aware that we're always being changed by something from the outside, something from the inside. We're always receiving. And that information, when we're in the herd mentality, we're not always aware of, and it can change our output, sometimes for the better, sometimes not. But when we're in this infinity, into this knowing or this awake state, then we are in gratitude for all that we receive. Even if we don't necessarily like it, we're in gratitude for it because we know that that is going to allow us to make better choices, and that changes the way we give. And this is kind of where I think everything in the world, it's what I call being the creator. It's not maybe so much what I hear a lot of people in the New Age religion talking about, of like, oh, you got to create this and that and wealth and abundance and blah 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 blah. I'm like, okay, well, that's cool, go ahead and do that. I'm not saying don't do that, but what if it was more about taking responsibility? Because sometimes those same people are big into boundaries, and everybody has to treat you a certain way so that you can be happy and you can feel safe and secure. But what if it was more about, I receive this information and now I know how to monitor and regulate my output, and I am aware of that. I think musicians do that, artists do that. You know, they go through a situation, they hear something, they feel something, they paint it, they form it in clay, they write a song, you know, and then they share it. And so they received input, an emotion, a belief, whatever, an experience, and it touched them and changed them, and they put it into some physical form, and then they share that, and someone else receives it based upon what they're going through in their life, what their experiences are, and then that changes them, and it just kind of goes on and on and on forever. And I think it's kind of fun being in that place of being aware that you have the ability to consciously touch another human being's life, the earth, the animals, whatever. You have the ability to be responsible for your own little area of the world. Maybe you can't change the whole world, but maybe you can change your thoughts, your home, whatever. So that's kind of how I see this this process of self-discovery, is being able to envision and put yourself into a different situation than you've already been in, and not being afraid of being wrong anymore. You know, make conscious choices, make educated choices as best you can. I'm not saying go out and do dumb things willy-nilly and go, oh, well, you know, I was just trying to see. No, make educated choices, and try, be a scientist, be a journalist, you know, ask questions. You want more information so that you can consciously start to create a freer and better you, a happier you. So good luck on this part, and I'll be having some more stuff for you soon.